on the Political Decode podcast. Let's get it started. You see the thumbnail.
To get more leaders on his side. You see this chart? There's one country that stands out in this chart. And that country is the country China depends on to keep its economy going. In fact, this chart isn't even entirely accurate. Not because I'm trying to lie to you guys, but it's because CCP lies to the world. You see, after 2028, when Trump first slapped tariffs on Chinese goods, China started redirecting their goods through other countries. In fact, China sends roughly the same amount of goods indirectly to United States as it sends directly. That means it's not.
Stop! Don't get a HELOC until you know about HEI. HELOCs are loans. You borrow, pay interest, and make monthly payments. HEI? No interest, no monthly payments. HELOC adds debt, HEI doesn't. You get cash upfront and repurchase your option when you cash settle, refinance.
It's not 50% of Chinese exports that come to the US, it's 30%. And it's not going to be easy for them to replace that after Trump has slapped them with 245% tariff. This is
Let's think about this. China GDP comes from about 5% US, but 35% of Chinese workers depend on the US economy. So how is this gonna all fizzle out? Are the CCP just going to abandon its people and do what communists do and dictate? Or are they gonna keep finding alternative ways to throw its people a bone? Very interesting. Let's play the film.
exactly why Xi Jinping is panicking, and he took off for an emergency trip around Asia to convince other leaders to stand united with China. Unfortunately, those leaders are not listening to Xi Jinping. Here we have more details about the dilemma Xi Jinping faces.
Xi Jinping is perfectly capable of taking China off the cliff. And so, he says he won't be bullied. He says he's not going to talk to us until we come begging. So, I don't know. But this is not going to be a good story for China. Because remember, our economy is much bigger than theirs. Even with their inflated gross domestic product reports, their economy is less than 2/3 the size of ours. Last year, China ran an enormous merchandise trade surplus against us, $295.4 billion, which was 5.8% bigger than the merchandise trade surplus in 2023. I mean, they've got everything to lose. Now, they can retaliate as they've done with the rare earth export ban. But, they tried that against Japan in 2010. It didn't work. China collapsed in a couple months. They can tell Boeing we're not accepting deliveries of planes. But if President Trump says if he prohibits Boeing from selling planes and replacement parts, there are going to be a lot of planes in China not flying. So, we have the power. The only way China wins this trade war is if it gets Trump to preemptively surrender.
Is he right? Let me know in the comment section, guys. Is he right what he just said? What do you think?
Now, CCP is already censoring tariff-related posts on social media, especially in China, where hashtags and searches for tariff and the number 104, which was the amount of tariff that China put on US goods entering the Chinese nation, were blocked on social media platform Weibo with pages showing an error message. This just goes to show how far the CCP will go to censor anything that criticizes the communist government. Similarly, CCP has bot farms overseas that downvotes any videos that criticizes the Chinese government in order to suppress it in the algorithm. So if you guys can do me a quick favor and hit that like and subscribe button down below, it really does help us out tremendously in
Wait, does that mean China bots are watching my content right now?
counteracting CCP bots. The funniest part of Xi canceling all the Boeing deliveries to China is the fact that he himself flies in a Boeing 747. You see, the Chinese Air Force One, the Chinese presidential plane, is made by Boeing, not a Chinese company. I'm guessing that's because Xi thinks Boeing is safer than whatever they got there in China. But now he's telling the airlines in China that they cannot buy the same Boeing plane that Xi himself is flying around the world in. You see, as soon as Trump tariffs were announced, the whole world kinda freaked out. Rightly so. These are the highest tariff numbers we have seen since 1930s. And we all know what happened in 1929. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that what Trump was doing would lead to a depression, but no one likes to be compared to 1929, and that's exactly why everyone was freaking out. But soon, almost every country reached out to the Trump administration, showing their openness to negotiating. Every country but one. Now, I'll let you guess what that was.
But now, those who are new to this conversation, do you know why they all reached out? Because they were already tariffing the United States very high. And in some instances, like the EU, maybe they say, oh, we just have a 30-40% tariff on you, but we want to allow cars here from the US, but you have to take our cars. Or we have other taxes, non-tariff, not it's called NTB, non-tariff barriers. So let me know in the comment section if I'm saying that correctly. But they had other tariffs that would add up to more than like 60%. So that's why Trump had did this, because I guess he looked at the books, or his person there that he has in finance looked at the books and was like, hey, the books are cooked. We have a $1 trillion trade deficit with China, and deficits with the EU, deficits with Mexico, deficits with Canada, practically deficits with the whole world. Enough is enough. So Trump slapped tariffs on them that were equal to what they were essentially charging us. And the rest of the world said, okay, we'll negotiate. Just please pause. So he put 10%, brought them all down to 10% until we pause and figure things out. However, China, China wants to play hardball, so let's see. Let's see if they can hit us a fast pitch.
What country was. But since every country did reach out for negotiations, Trump put a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs and lowered everyone's tariff to 10% except that one country. Now, as many of you guys may already know, that one country was China. Here, Trump is explaining himself why he did this.
Jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, they were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents, they wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right.
Now here we have exact details of what President Trump means when he says that China has been abusing the world trade system. Now here we have a report from the Select Committee on Chinese Communist Party. This is a bipartisan congressional committee that investigates CCP. And here's what they had to say. The CCP has been waging economic war for years, and we must fight back.
Once you go through the cold calling and the texting follow-up, you've been through hell. You've been through the ringer.
Massive economic losses due to the CCP's actions. An estimated $600 billion annually is lost to Chinese IP theft. Now, we'll get into exact details as to what this means, because...
So, O'Leary was on that show, CNN, MSNBC, I can't remember which one. And he was saying how he had a product, it would IPO and then take off, and he would sell the product in China. And once he reached about 5 million in sales, he would get shut down in China. He was selling it, Alibaba. Tell me if I'm saying it right in the comment section. I don't want to be disrespectful, but he was selling the product through Alibaba. Then they got shut down. Only a month later to see that same product being sold on Alibaba and renamed and rebrand. So what they're saying by when the Chinese steal intellectual property and theft or whatnot. These are some of the tactics they play. They will let you manufacture your product there, and if it starts to take off and get big, like in O'Leary's case, he started hitting 5 million in sales. Once he started hitting 5 million in sales, they shut him out of the process. They stopped him from being able to sell the product. And then weeks later, that same product was being sold from China, marketed under a different brand, a different name, and all the intellectual properties of that product were stolen. And he said, dealing with them, you cannot go to the WTO or anybody to file a complaint. They do nothing. So these are things that have been going on with China since they've entered the World Trade Organization.
This is a really, really big deal, and China has been abusing this to steal from American companies, American founders, and American citizens. But moving on the thread, China's massive trade surplus are no accident. They are the result of decades of cheating. The CCP rigged the system, manipulated markets, gutted US factories, and stole almost 2.5 million American jobs. This is a war on American workers, and we have let it go on for too long. Sudden CCP policy shifts, like the one in the private education sector in July 2021, have erased billions in market value, caused significant losses for US investors, impacting retirement accounts, and demonstrating the severe regulatory risk. China's unpredictable rules create global financial instability that can raise costs for Americans. Recent tariffs from POTUS and the White House are necessary first step, but not the last. The CCP is waging a campaign against America that goes far beyond trade. To defend our economy, our national security, we need a strategy that matches the scale of the threat. Now, China's argument here is simple. China wants to argue to the world that national security and trade are two different things. They shouldn't be seen as interconnected. But in reality,
In reality, for China, tell me if you disagree or not in the comments section. For China, trade and national security are one and the same. That's why they always have to have that small man's complex and that they need to have the upper hand in trade. They cannot feel like they're even-handed or have a situation where they'll take a 40 to 60 split with the US because the US is giving them a much larger market to sell to. Yes, there's more people in China, but their buying power is not even close to the United States buying power, if you know what I'm saying. So for China, it's like everything has to be skewed in their favor, and it's all leads to we're gonna hurt you in trade, and we're gonna hurt you in outside of trade, strategically. I think they overplayed their hand when it comes to the U.S. Maybe thinking the U.S. internally will structurally fall apart and eat its own, which this is why it's really important here, if you're a United States citizen, to push back on the Democrat Party because they have no clue what they're doing. They're activists over there, and they will fold to China, to Canada, to Mexico, to think of the smallest country in the world. They will fall to because they are basically um, traitors. They are traitors, treasonous, and they will hand the country over because they really don't see what they do as affecting them other than the crooked deals they'll be able to make along the way. They'll sell the country out, and that's what they've been doing. So probably the Democrat Party in the next 2 years will be replaced by another alternative party to compete against the Republican Party. That's kind of what I see. Because the Republican Party doesn't just have domestic issues um, that they're concerned with. They're concerned with international issues as well that protect the United States. And the other party, Democrat Party, is just have shown to be incompetent of doing either one. And now it's the time of national security, and trade is important. And so is our national security. Let's play some more.
That's just not true. And even CCP knows this is not true. That's why the Chinese government bans foreign companies from getting access to Chinese market. They also ban many foreign companies specifically on national security grounds. But for some reason now CCP wants to argue with the world saying that national security and trade are not interconnected.
Wait, if you have not done so, please like, subscribe, tap that bell so you can get notified.
And on top of this, China's definition of trade is a lot different than the world's definition of trade. Chinese companies just steal from other companies, other countries in name of trade, and then they steal the customers by stealing the IP, stealing the product. Here's more details on this specific scam that China has been carrying out for almost 2 decades.
What happens is, as soon as a product like that hits 5 million run rate in the American domestic market, so it's a proven winner, you know it's a winner.
Kevin O'Leary, he was the one I was mentioning earlier. He'd have a product, it's a proven winner, hit about 5 million in sales, and then they would knock it off the market and then rebrand it themselves and sell it back to the US. I'll let it come out of the horse's mouth so you can hear it yourself.
It gets knocked off in China. And let's say I'm just giving you numbers. Let's say you spend $100 million developing the product, okay, in R&D in the United States. You raise the money, you're an entrepreneur. You worked 8 days a week. You worked your tail off, and now you got a hit. Not every product's a hit, but this is a hit because it's proven itself to 5 million. It's always around 5 million this happens. Boom, it gets knocked off in China. You find it on Alibaba at 30 to 40% discount, and it's on Amazon too, and it's being sold in retail.
Make just one simple change when filling out your FAFSA to cut your EFC and
same name in the US retailers. And it's a small company that just got started. The Chinese knocked it off, ripped off the IP, don't even care. You can't go litigate. You can go to the World Trade Organization that they agreed to back in 2000 to be part of, and there's rules about that, but they ignore them all. They've never, ever, ever complied, not once, and there's thousands of complaints at WTO. I mean, I could just go on with a litany of reasons why this, and finally, I'm pissed. I'm really pissed. Enough, because you can't cheat and steal forever, and we've not given them a single consequence. Nothing happens to them when they do this.
This is exactly what the Congressional Committee meant when they say that China has been stealing $600 billion annually just through IP theft. They are literally stealing American products that are patented. You and me who live here, we cannot go just copy a product that's successful in America because we'll get sued and we'll lose more than what we would make selling a stolen product. But that's not the case for Chinese companies. They steal from American companies, they steal from American founders, they copy the same product, then they sell it in America, and if you go to sue these companies in China, well, guess what? You can't really sue Chinese companies because they are state-owned. You cannot really sue the Chinese government in China. They run the country. You cannot even go to the WTO, World Trade Organization, because guess what? You're just one person in a long line of people who are complaining against China. In fact, just last year, WTO received roughly 400 complaints from different countries, not people, different countries. And guess how many of those complaints were just against China? 198. Almost half the complaints that WTO received last year were against just one country, China. And it's not just the West that's complaining about Chinese trade practices. 117 complaints out of 198 were from the global South. So the group of countries that are supposedly China-friendly, but the same countries that take on Chinese loans also complain that China is ripping them off in trade and China is fighting unfairly. Now, for the CCP, karma is now coming. CCP wanted the rest of the world to present a united front against the United States when the tariffs were announced. But guess what? Every single country called in to negotiate, and now China is left alone. And Xi Jinping knows that he cannot win this fight alone. And we can see the proof of this from the actions CCP has carried out ever since the trade war was announced.
So there you have it, folks. The world abandons China. Well, that's what they say. I think the world will always do business with China because China has the ability to still supply cheap labor. China right now is just looking for strong economies to buy that cheap labor. They're gonna find out the hard way that I think the world is finding out. There's a bigger middle class in the United States with money than the world even fathoms. Like in the rest of the world, you have poor, you have rich, and there's not much in between. For a long time, we believed that in the United States, but those who were once considered rich in our country, they are just now middle class, believe it or not. If you make between, 300,000 and 800,000 a year, you're middle class now. You know, it just is what it is because now you have quite a few millionaires, billionaires, to where 500,000 a year is just middle class now. Sadly, if you're making less than 200,000 a year in the U.S., you are not even in the middle class. I mean, excuse me, if you're not making 200K in the U.S., you are not middle class.
And we can see the proof of this from the actions CCP has carried out ever since the trade war was announced. You see, when the tariffs were first announced, a shocking news came out of China. And the news was that China, Japan, and South Korea will jointly respond to US tariffs. Now, of course, many people overreacted when they first read this report. Because at the end of the day, Japan and South Korea are very close US allies. In fact, we have major bases in Japan and South Korea to protect them against Chinese military. And now they are partnering with China? How could you not be surprised? But this is where we have to look at the source of the news. It's the Chinese state media, the same media that's controlled by the CCP. They basically get their talking points directly from Xi Jinping. And this report was nothing but a lie. It was quickly disproven. Just hours after this report came out, both Tokyo and Seoul denied it. In fact, Tokyo went as far as to say that there were no such discussion ever held. And Seoul said that China has somewhat exaggerated what they talked about. So this report was a complete lie from this Chinese state media, but it does show us what CCP's goals are. They really wanted more countries on their side, and it could be because Xi Jinping realized from the beginning that China cannot win a trade war against the United States. 30% of Chinese trade goes to one country. So no matter how much Chinese officials yell on national TV saying that they can replace US,
now, if your local business owner